Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. It is a very rainy Saturday here in the metro Atlanta area. My computer's telling me we have a flood watch today, which means it's been raining and raining and raining. Yeah, poor Riley did not want to, go potty last night. She's a little bit of a princess and decides that, if it's raining, I don't want to go outside. So I had to get up early this morning, let her out while it wasn't raining. And she was happier. It was fine. But yeah, I was setting up my screen this morning and I'm like, I haven't done this in a hot minute. Trying to remember how I did everything with the cameras and everything, because last week I just did a Zoom with my friend Stephanie, and that was a fairly easy setup because it was just one camera. Didn't have to worry about sewing machine, didn't have to worry about anything else. But then, today I've got my whole setup back up again. I'm like, how do I do this? That's what happens when you're just focusing on Vlogmas for 31 days and then all this other stuff. So, either way, it's all good. I'm looking out and it's pretty dark outside. Like I said, it's been raining, raining, raining. So, it's all good. Today, though, I've decided to do something that I didn't think I would ever do on my live because space. I'm going to show you how I do my binding, which I think everybody's going to be excited for. And this is how I do it. And I have to preface it with that because other people do it slightly different. It's going to be. Oh, pardon me. That was a crazy sneeze. Some people will do it completely different, and that is okay. The way that you do your binding, and the way that I do my binding, and the way that somebody else does their binding, that as long as it works for you, it works for you. But some people like to see how other people do their binding, so that'll give them a little bit of an idea of how to do things. This is machine binding, so it is a slightly different, okay, it's a very big different technique than hand binding, but the way that I do things, we'll get to that in a second. But let's start with the Chatteroonies. We have Carl, who came in early this morning, says good morning, Russ. My friend Steven of the 8 Quilter says hi all. We have Charlotte in here as well, who says good morning to folks. Good morning, sweet granny, who says good morning, Russ and all quilters. Smile, the fabric is shining bright. The fabric's shining bright. The sun isn't here, but that's fine. It just means, hey, it's time to quilt instead of being outside and playing. The weather here, crazy. Just because it's like roulette this time of year as to what our weather is going to be. I was looking at my time hop, and years ago we had snow or ice, and today it's like 70 with an inch of rain in the next 3 hours. So it's all crazy. Good morning, Julie. How you doing? Good morning, Colleen and Dubraka. So, to prefix, I'm in the middle of doing the binding because I did not want to, do half of the binding and be like, well, I can't show you the other half. So, because this has got to be shown and told next week. And with it being next week, that means I have to finish it this weekend. And I have a second one that has to be finished this weekend as well. So if Russ was smart, he would have shown some of the starts on one quilt and some of the finishes on the other, but Russ wasn't smart. Russ didn't get the second quilt off the long arm in time. So we are doing it this way. First things first, I do 2.5-inch strip bindings. So I cut my stuff in 2.5-inch strips and I line them up on the edges. Sew the diagonal. However you want to do that, it's whatever works best for you to get your diagonal pieces. That, I think, is standard across most bindings. Some people do 2.25. I think those are like masochists because you don't have a lot of extra room for the 2.25, but you do have the extra room for the 2.5. So that's what I do. I sew them end to end. I press everything flat. I press the seams are at a diagonal and I press them open. And then I sew the binding in half. So you get a, you can open up. Can I get this opened up? So I have it folded in half to get, what is this? About 1.5 inch in width binding. So it's folded. You can either roll it on yourself or they make binding spools, which I could not find mine right now. So that's why I'm not using a binding spool. Otherwise, I'd show you what a binding spool looks like. It's just a piece of acrylic that can wind in on itself. That's basically how I keep things from, like if you drop this, it's all unwound. You drop a binding spool, it's not as much. Let's see who came in while I was. Good morning, Joanne G. Julie says good news. She's working on borders for Kona Block and Look. Ooh, yeah. We have that going on in a couple weeks. Like 3 weeks, we'll be working on the piano keys. So if you get further ahead, that's perfectly fine. So when you have this, the way that I start my binding, which again, this is what happened in the past, I find a spot on the bottom. And I do this on the bottom because it's the bottom. Some people start on one side, some people start on the bottom. It's your preference. And I mark basically about a 10-inch space. And I do this roughly. I know about how big my blocks are, so I just say, okay, this side and this side of whatever blocks, and that gives me about 10 inches. Doesn't have to be accurate. If you're using some of the tools like the binding tool, you have to be exact. But I don't, and it's raining pretty hard. I don't know if that's coming through the microphone. Either way. And then I will start my binding. I will start with a couple stitches in, or I leave a tail of about 3/4 of that distance. So 3/4 of 10 is about 7.5 inches. I will leave that 7.5 inches of tail, and I just start sewing. I do like 3 or 4 stitches, back stitch, just so that it stays in place, because we're going to be doing some pulling of stuff, and then continue on. And I will go around the quilt, and I will actually get to show you what I do when I get to a corner, because I'm halfway down a side as we speak. So I know that was a lot of words to tell you this is a work in progress, and this is how things look. And I'm going to apologize in advance if things fall in the way, because I'm not accustomed to having all of this bulk over here, which is a lot of bulk over here in front of a camera. So I'm going to try to keep watch on the screen to make sure especially like when I'm working on a section that needs to be visible. Like when I get to the corner, I'm going to do my best to make sure that there's enough out of here to make sure you have full visibility. But yeah, I'm going to do what I can to make sure you see. Good morning, Karen B. How you doing today? So like I said, this is side 3. I've already gone around 2 full sides. This is halfway down, and I've got the bottom half like a third of the way done. My stitch length, and this is based on my machine, is a 2.0. I'm doing a straight stitch, and my width I have set to 5.5. And again, that's the stuff that's specific to my machine. In short, what I want is the seam allowance to be about 3/8 of an inch. And I know we don't deal with eighths, but it's just a smidge over 1/4 of an inch. So when I have my machine set to a 5.5, if I line against the right side of the presser foot, then everything, the seam allowance is about just over 1/4 of an inch. So it's the opposite of a scant quarter. It's like a chunky 1/4 of an inch, just a little bit more. For a little bit of setup, I'm just using my standard foot. A lot of people love to use their walking foot. I've just learned how to use this foot. I don't know if there's much of a difference. Your opinion. If you prefer the walking foot, use the walking foot. If you prefer to use a regular foot, use a regular foot. Again, there's no rules. I said I'm using a straight stitch. There's also a silicone, one of the sillies, mat that you can buy that it's like a Teflon mat. You can put it over your machine and onto your quilting table and stuff to make this a lot less sticky. The plastic on these tables tends to grab the fabric at times when you've got enough weight. And I don't have one, so I'm just very careful. A lot of people also use quilting gloves when they're doing this because it'll help grab the fabric. They have little rubber fingers on it. If you can't find the quilting gloves, they also have gardening gloves that have the same rubber type that may actually be cheaper because they overcharge things for quilters. But that's because they're pretty. So again, I'm not using the extra tools that a lot of people would be using. So I don't have my quilter's gloves. I don't have a silicone mat. I don't have anything else that's really, I'm just gonna say it as nice to haves. This goes to show that you can do things with the tools that you should already have with your sewing machine. So I'm just going to get through. Like I said, I have everything lined up against the edge of the quilt, which I trimmed. And as long as you keep in here with the settings that I have on my machine, again, it's my machine. When you find it on your machine, write everything down and you'll figure it out and have consistency. Good morning, Stephanie. How are you doing today? I saw Stephanie is doing a UFO challenge. Well, I don't think it involves, abducting cows. But she has a challenge that she wants people to finish UFOs and is helping her finish her UFOs. Because heaven knows we have UFOs. So like I said, I'm just sewing that little bit. I'm trying to move things a little bit at a time, trying to keep things out of the way. unwind a little bit from my binding at a time. And the thread I'm using is it's a shade that will blend in to the fabrics. I want my binding to kind of blend, not or not the binding, the stitching to kind of blend here. So I'm just doing what I can to keep things kind of hidden, kind of blending. And as we approach our corners, and this one, I'm sorry, I only have one camera angle. It means when I get future camera angles, I will be able to, I don't know, record a new video at some point. But I'm going to slowly approach the corner. And when I'm about that 3/8 of an inch away, which I believe that's where that is, you can kind of tell by doing a quick rotate and seeing, does it line up? And it basically does. You don't want to go too far over because that's going to impact your ability to, I don't know why I undid my rotate. If you go too far, it kind of impedes your ability to get your sharp miter. And if you don't go far enough, you got a very loose corner. So let me get some things shifted so that it's out of your way. And I do a locking stitch just so that I have my corner locked. And I pull up the needle and I pull everything out. And I will line this side up as if I'm starting. And then I will get this edge right here, which is a very tiny edge, and make sure that they line up perfectly. Because that's what helps get your 45-degree miter, your perfect miter. You make sure that these are perfect. And then I'm going to try to get my little point right here at the very top, which is, it's kind of seeable. I have a little bit of an overhang. Right now it's too much of an overhang. You want overhang, but you only want a couple threads. And I say a couple. This is one of those that as you work on your projects, you learn how much of an overhang works best for you. Because how you turn your stuff is going to be different than the way I turn my stuff. But when I get my stuff in order, the things that I'm trying to do at this point is I want to make sure the two pieces that are folded here are lined up. I want to make sure that I'm lined up on this side, and I want to make sure that I have a couple threads up top, and I will put it underneath my presser foot again, making sure that everything is lined up. Take a couple locking stitches. So everything is in place how I want it. If you have moved at this point accidentally, you could either go with it, which is probably what I would have done, or you can pull it out and you can rip that locking stitch that you just put in and go forward again. There's a lot of people who will sew off the corner when they do this and cut their thread. You can cut your thread anytime that you do this, but I don't, because this is how I do it. I do a couple back stitches, and then I start going again. And again, this is the whole keep everything in line. We're not doing anything overly scary yet. And I say yet because we are about to do the scary part of binding. And it's not that scary. So I have a wonder clip right here. And this is telling me that this is about where I want to stop. I started right here. This is about 10-ish inches between the two. So I want to stop about here. You can do more. You can do less. Like I said, if you're using the binding tool, which is a actual tool, it tells you need to be exactly 10 inches. My method, you can be, 10 inches, you could be 12 inches, you can be 8 inches, just as long as you have enough room that you can maneuver. So that's about where I want to be. I'm going to back stitch a couple stitches. Go back forward those couple stitches. Lock it in place. And I am going to cut my thread. Good morning, Tracy, who says that she loves my flying geese tattoo. She wants to get a quilty tattoo, but hasn't decided what yet. Yeah, I kind of joke about this because I went to QuiltCon and they had a thing that said if you had a quilty tattoo, they would give you a free sticker. So I was like, ooh, my $300 tattoo finally paid off and I got a free sticker. Good morning, Diana. How you doing? So now threads are cut. I have 2 tails. And then I have to now decide what I want to do because I have a seam right here. And if I had been looking ahead, I could have stopped my stitching. No, I really couldn't stop it a little bit further away. So I'm going to have 2 seams kind of close together at the bottom of my quilt. And that's okay. It's the bottom. There's potentially ways that I could have prevented that. But honestly, not a lot you can do. So I have this tail, and then I'm going to have this tail. And I'm going to just cut. Extra binding, it's not much, but it's there. I end up using my extra binding as my start stops because this is less than a width of fabric. If you want to put it back in your scraps as, most of a jelly roll, you can unfold it and have most of a jelly roll strip, but that's it. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to cut you don't want to cut it close to 2.5 inches is what I'm going to tell you. You either want to cut it really long, you want to cut it really short. I'm going to cut it really long. And when I cut these, I'm going to do them all the same way. Basically fold it in on itself, take your scissors, bring it up, and just snip. So we have this extra piece, and this is how we are going to figure out where we are going to make our cuts. So I'm going to take that strip off, and actually what I should probably do so I can figure out where the okay, that was a really nice thunder. Wow. It's still going. It's still going. It's still go. Wow. Okay. Um. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the other quilt quilted today. It's still going. Okay. Nope. Oh, wow. Okay. So, where was I? So, what I think I'm going to do is, in order to keep the seams from falling on top of each other, there's no way I can do that. This is going to be a really sucky seam. But again, they happen. So because I can't do much about trying to get rid of this seam out of here, because that's where it's like right in the middle, what I am going to do is I'm going to start by cutting off the selvage of this side. Good morning, Ingrid. I can't remember if I said good morning because I was just engrossed in the thunder that we just had. So like I said, I'm cutting all of mine the exact same way, and that helps get us a mostly straight cut. That's not exactly straight. I don't know why that didn't come out exactly straight. I'm going to try to make this a little bit straighter. And then I line my template piece on top of the cut piece. Actually, this is going to work out pretty decent because, I mean, it's going to be a little bit okay, but, and then what I do is I fold the other tail so that it lines up with the template. And once you get it lined up with the template, you have to make sure everything is flat, because if it's not flat, you're going to get a little bit too much length, and then that's a little bit of an issue. So once you have everything flat, I will take back again like 3 or 4 threads, similar to what I did in the corner, just to make sure that this is just a tad tighter. So I have my template, and again, this is so I don't have to pull out my ruler and figure out 2.5 inches. And this is also if you have 2.25 inches. If you did 2 3/4 inch, if you did a bigger binding, smaller binding, it doesn't matter. It's just this is your width of your binding. And then I will line the top piece on top of that. I have it exactly where I want it to be, and you only get one chance at this one. And you come over here, line it up, and slice. And I normally say, pray that you did it right. I'm going to put my stuff back to my sewing. That doesn't sound good. I can't tell if I'm hearing the sirens or if I'm hearing car. So what I do here, I have my 2 tails, and I will take the bulk that I have between them, and I will take a wonder clip and clip them. I think I'm just hearing standard traffic, because if it was the sirens, it would have gotten louder. Good morning, Candace. How you doing? Diana said, can't I move the other seam back further? Maybe not now that I have trimmed it. Yeah, definitely not now that I've trimmed it. But yeah, I probably could have seam ripped the starting seam a little bit just to give me a little bit more. But it still worked. It's just going to be, in this case, two seams kind of close to each other. And this is where you have to make sure you're doing things right. You want to line your stuff facing each other at a 45 degree, or not at a 45 degree, at 90 degrees to each other. And what I generally do first is I will pin it and kind of make sure that when it comes together that it looks right. Because I can't tell you how many times I have flipped this stuff. This is one of those, I put it together, make sure it looks right. When it does look right, don't move. I'm doing pins. I don't normally use pins, but apparently in binding I do. And this is mostly because I don't have a lot of room in this case. So I'll put 2 pins there, and then I will do a couple pins going the opposite direction. And I want to get the pins out of my sewing direction. And this is also where some people are better than me. And I don't know if this is going to work accidentally or not, because I don't intentionally do things when it comes to this. I think this is going to go opposite. But what some people will do is they will make sure that, and I am opposite, and I don't care because I've already pinned this. If you make sure that, or is this the right way? When you're making your binding and you have your pieces like this, if you make sure that the same piece is on top as the rest of your binding, then all of your binding angles will go the same way. If you end up having the opposite side up top, then your binding pieces will go into like a little inwards to each other. Again, nobody's going to notice but the judges in this case. That's something that the person that taught me binding said. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to make sure everything is out of the way. Try to push as much as I can down here, and I apologize. I've got the bulk here I can't show, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew corner to corner. I've lowered my I put my machine settings back on my sewing binding settings, binding strip settings, which is a 1.8 stitch length and across the center. I'll get a couple stitches in. I do not want to sew over pins. Let me get that out of the way. Again, do not want to sew over pins. Do not want to loose a pin. Pull out my pins. And before we do anything, we test it. Oh no. I'll get to that in a second. So, testing it, everything stays flat. I've still got the bulk here. And My two seams are going the same direction. They're, like I said, it's a little bit, you shouldn't have two seams that close to each other, but they're going the same direction, so it doesn't matter. So now I know that everything is there. I can trim off the back to about 1/4 of an inch, which is what you would do with your regular binding. And I will finger press these open. And then finger press it kind of flat. Put my machine settings back to where they were. And I'm going to start a couple threads back, or a couple stitches back, and just so. So what I just uh-oh'd about a minute ago is Candace is trying to enable me. She asked me, did I see the new Art East kit, frogs with a new Tula frog line? No. I did see that I think it's called Prince Charming, is being deja vu'd by Tula Pink, which means that she brings it back with new colors, new enhancements of stuff. So I sent that to my sister and said, do you want me to make you a quilt? And she said, no, the commissions that I'm already doing, you're making me do is fine. I'll give you a break after this. I'm like, okay. So I now need to look at that, and I have a minute. So Art East Prince Charming. Of course, Google doesn't come up with it, so I'll have to look at it later. That's just Google telling me I need to finish this, because I need to get to the other side so I can show you how I finish this stuff. So I will do my locking stitch and basically continue it forward. He sent an email. Oh, I haven't gotten to my emails from them yet. The last email I got was the shirts, shirts and stuff are on their way, and we can save shipping. So I'll have to look at that. And then as I approach the other end, I'm just going to take it a little slow and just try to aim for the stitching on the other side and lock it. And we have it on the top. Candace says she loves the colors on the quilt that I am making. Is that for one of Fran's friends? No! This is a baby quilt. This is one of my former co-workers. I made her a quilt with the same pattern, but in Tula Pink for her previous child. And she said, can you make my new baby a one? And I'm like, as long as I can make it in blueprint. And she goes, okay, fine. So this is... Oh, yeah, the other thing I said, it's sewn to the front, which people are going to think I'm a little crazy, but I'm not. And if you are hand binding, you would do your standard pressing, fold it over to the back, and hand stitch. I'm not hand binding, but I still need to kind of press, and I'm just going to finger press, and I'm going to just do this section at a time. Because we only got 20 minutes. I don't have time to do a full press of this, which is, again, why Russ should have done another quilt, had it prepped for the live, and I could have just done what I call magic of television. But I'm finger pressing the binding open, and I'm only going to do a little bit at a time. Actually, let's see how far I can get, because this is the more important piece, because I can't pull this out from underneath the machine without breaking thread. So I'd rather get as much of this pressed as I can. Morning, Amy. How you doing? Amy says she's excited for Prince Charming. It will be neat to see it next to the few originals that she has. Yeah, seeing the recolors is really nice. And then I promise I'm trying to get through this as quick as this is, again, faster than pulling it over to an ironing station, but still a little annoying. Oops, didn't mean to block the camera. As I said, I don't have all the space here. Because the next step is kind of magical. Oh, I'm sorry, Ingrid. She said her package from Art East was scheduled to be delivered today, but it was updated this morning and won't be here till Tuesday. Well, maybe it'll be there Monday. Because usually things don't get delayed 2 days. Usually things get 1 day. Good morning, Yoga and Quilts, who says first time live joiner, newer-ish Russ listener. Welcome. Stephanie says she sent me a picture of the... Oh my God. Is that coming through? That Fran may want this. I'll have to see how much it is. I might give it to her for, Christmas or something. I was trying to get her to buy it for herself, but maybe it'll be a little bit. But back to Yoga and Quilts. Thank you for joining. Glad to see that you're new and stuff. I try not to bite in that, but Amy says, "Oh, that is awesome." Yeah, it's an awesome quilt. I think I'm almost back to the start. Either that or right. Nope, I am back to the start. Okay. So like I said, this is what we would be doing if we were hand binding. And I'm machine binding. So what I do is I grab my clips, because you're going to be using a lot of clips. I start before the seam that I just made. So I'm going to start here, and I fold over, and I make sure, one that you can see, but when I fold over, I make sure I am past the stitch line. And I clip, and I will do this for several inches, because I only have one chance to really do this. And again, this should have been a Russ was planning a little bit better. Maybe I could, when I get a better camera set up, I'm probably going to try to do this on a smaller project so you can see this from start to finish. I'll make like a placemat or something in the future. But again, that's going to be after Russ has better camera setups. But I'm folding this over so that it covers the seam line, or the stitch line. And it's important that it covers the stitch line, because you will see in a minute why. And as I approach the corners, what I first do is I trim the quilt part of the corner. I do not trim the binding part. I trim the quilt part just a hair, because every little bit that you can do to reduce bulk in your corners helps. Ingrid says, "Welcome to the shenanigans." To yoga and quilts. So what I do in the corners, and this is again hard to angle for everyone to see, but I make the fold as it naturally would, and then I fold it back onto itself and do my best to line the 45-degree up, and I will do a clip. And then I will add a couple clips past the seam. And that's just to help keep everything in place. I'm just grabbing whatever clips I can. I normally do, honestly, about this many clips. I have been known to do the entire quilt around. It's just however many clips you have and how comfortable you feel like going. And then on the front side of things, I do the same thing. So I'm starting at this clip, and I will place a clip the opposite direction just to tell me that's not where I'm starting. And I will go back just a few clips just so that I have the runway to start with. And every single time that I'm clipping, I'm making sure that I am past the stitch line. So I have that, and this is where I'm starting. I'm resetting my machine settings. Actually, I'm just going to turn off and back on to reset it to scratch. And I don't use the standard foot. I use this foot, and I have no idea what this foot is called. I call it the stitch in the ditch foot. It has a little bit of a, what is that called? Shark fin or something here, which guides basically the needle to the can I get you to focus up here? You're not going to focus up here. Can I get you to focus up here? You are going to focus up there. So you see there is a little bit of a guide that's going on in there. So I used this foot, and I set my stitch length to about a 2.5, which is the default setting on the machine. That's partly because it goes faster, partly because I like that type of a look. It goes similar to the quilting stitches. And I will line things up, and I kind of just shimmy it in there and take a couple locking stitches, and I will use the guide that's on the foot to stay inside that ditch as I'm sewing. And as long as you are over the stitch line, you're basically recreating that same stitch line a second time. So the other side should catch. And I say should because you can't see what's going on. And that's the most scary part about what I'm doing, is you can't see what's going on. And there's a chance that a couple stitches may not catch. And what I do is I find those, I mark them, and I just restitch them. The same method. I will just kind of push the fabric in a little bit more. If I can't get it to catch, I will do a couple inches of hand stitching, because I'll do hand stitching for a couple inches, and I will do hand stitching for, certain quilts. But machine stitching, I have learned, is a lot faster. And if I use this method, you don't have that little bit of a line on the front when you have to sew it, or you don't have the little bit of a lip. Basically, the things that I don't like about what I have seen other people do for machine stitching, and again, it's a preference, I don't have. It makes the front look a lot cleaner. And after we get to this corner, I will show you how it looks, because I will be able to lift it once I rotate. And corners, you just got to be careful. You got to take it slow. You're going to come off. I'm going to take off my glasses so I can see this a little bit better, because you want to make sure that you get right into that corner, which I have made. And I'm going to do a locking stitch and rotate. And come out of the corner, and I'm just going to do a couple more stitches, and we will take a look at what's going on here. Okay, so as you see, this is the front of the quilt. You can't really see the stitches. And if you flip over to the back, you have what is traditionally seen on the front when you do machine binding. You have that little bit of a lip, but it just blends in and everything. So you have a little bit more security. Some people think that machine binding is a little bit more secure than hand binding. Beg to differ. I think they're both about the same. But you have just that nice clean. Again, people aren't looking at the edge or looking at the back, scrutinizing it when you give them a quilt. If they are using it to keep warm, they're going to be looking at the top and keeping warm underneath the back. If you put it on the wall, which frankly a lot of people do with some of the smaller like wall hangings, you will never know, because people who look at the back of your quilt, if it's hanging on the wall, need to be spanked. So that's why I like this method. And then when I get around to the other end, all I do is just go back a couple stitches over, do my locking stitch, and trim the extra threads on the back. Might use a little bit of fray check just to make sure that it doesn't come apart, which if you use locking stitches, it shouldn't come apart. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm basically going to go around the entire quilt. And like I said, sometimes if it's a small project, I will clip all the way around, or I will clip as far around as I can with the amount of clips that I have, because I have clips. And when I get around to where I don't have stuff clipped, I will take a little bit of a pause, clip more, and get me back to the beginning. And again, that's also why I have the separate, well, I had the separate clip just to know where to start, because I wanted to make sure I didn't start at the very front. But yeah, that's how I do binding. I hope it has helped anybody who is a little terrified of doing binding. There is zero reason to be terrified. If you do your machine binding a different way, maybe this has given you a couple ideas, because I see Duvraka said that it's smart to use this foot, whatever the foot's called. I don't know what it's called. I think it has an R on mine, but again, don't know what. I don't even know if this foot came with my machine or if it came in a set of feet that I had purchased separately. So if I knew more about this foot, I'd be able to share. I don't. I just know that it's got the shark fin, I like to call it, and it lines up. So I think it might even be a stitch in the ditch foot. But I would figure if it's more of a quilting foot, it would be more of like a walking foot, so that you feed things evenly. Because if I'm actually doing genuine quilting through here, I would probably want it more of a walking foot, not this type of foot if I'm doing stitch in the ditch. But whatever. Again, it works. It works beautifully for me. And it mostly hides the stitching in the binding area. So I'm going to leave it here because it's raining and I need to figure out if I can get Riley out, or if it's going to stop raining at some point so I can get her out again, because she hasn't been out since this morning. Amy says she needs to take the binding class at our local quilt shop. She knows how to do it, but every time she does her binding, it always comes out different. Okay, I'm going to tell you this, Amy. I took the machine binding class a few years ago, and the instructor said, "Why are you in this class? You can do binding." And I said, "Yes, I can do hand binding, but I can't do machine binding. I've seen videos and stuff, but I don't know how to do it." And she just kind of stared at me. I was like, it takes me like a week to do hand binding on a quilt because it's so slow. And she teaches like 3 or 4 different techniques. One of the things that she talks about is when I joined the 2 seams together at the end. She does it. But her class teaches you to fold it over to the front, which is not a bad thing. That's the way that machine binding is traditionally done. And I learned a lot in her class. I learned a lot of tips, tricks, techniques, some of the stuff I've tried at home and said, this is not for me. and then some of the other stuff I've tried and I've integrated in here. So yes, take the class. It usually has like 1 or 2 slots open each time they offer it because it's part of the beginner class. So yeah, I highly recommend taking that class. And if you're at anywhere else, I always recommend taking classes at your local quilt shop. Even if you think you know the technique, you always learn some stuff that you don't expect to learn. And like when I took that class, one of the things that I did say was, this was worth the price of admission. This is what I learned that I did not know before I took the class. And I think every time I take a class, I learn something. So yeah, make sure if this YouTube University class seemed a little confusing, take a class at your local quilt shop, and then you can have the opportunity to ask questions, get some interactive help. You can actually do it at the same time because you're going to have that. So yeah, so I'm going to figure out weather and get some stuff done, and hopefully I will have 2 quilts bound before next Saturday, because yeah, that's when I have to be, everything's got to be ready for show and tell. Have a wonderful rest of your day.